What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, March 28th, 2017, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling our dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phones when you call on in. And yes, we've got some new equipment, so there may be some little tiny glitches, but overall things are running a lot better than they were just a short time ago. And so I want to do a little tip of the hat, if I actually owned a hat, to our hardworking technical crew there in our control room, Mike, obviously, and Dan, and the rest of the gang. They're dealing with very antiquated equipment, and they've replaced it with not quite so antiquated equipment, and just trying to stay on the air any way that we can. All righty, getting into the news here, Obamagate is beginning to definitely show signs. It is going into an ugly, ugly scandal. Devin Nunes has confirmed that the Obama administration used intelligence information gathered on Donald Trump and his people for political opposition. And this is coming out of Bloomberg, and basically saying that all of this intelligence information, which was being sheet-dipped as an investigation into Russia, was going to the White House, and from there it was finding its way to whoever was opposed to Donald Trump, which appears to be pretty much the entire government right now. And because of that, now all of a sudden there's a huge outcry in the Congress. Devin Nunes should recuse himself from the Russia probe because he doesn't believe, as we do, that Donald Trump and Russia are in cahoots together. We only want somebody who has already convicted Donald Trump in his mind to be in charge of all these investigations. And there really is a panic going on out there. Chuck Schumer is out there demanding that Nunes step down. And, of course, Nunes says, I'm not going anywhere. And the big stink they're making is that Nunes met a source over at the White House. Oh, my goodness, the head of an investigation can't talk to the office of the president. Oh, that's horrible. No, actually what's going on is very simple. Nunes needed to review some documents that are only available on the executive branch's intranet. And just like other aspects of the government, there are private computer networks that are not available to the general internet. So the only way he could look at the documents, he had to go over to the White House and use one of their computers on their network to review the documents. That's it. That's what happened. And they're trying to turn this into the, oh my goodness, he's a traitor to the cause, which I'm sure from the point of view of Hillary's supporters is absolutely true, because anybody who is not pushing to remove Trump and install Empress Hillary I obviously is a traitor to the cause here. And a lot of people are beginning to realize, like this article over at RINF.com, in any semblance of bipartisanship on these intelligence committees has evaporated. It's turning into just another faction fight along party lines, and now, instead of actually investigating, what they're trying to do is pick off the GOP leadership, or indeed any leadership of these committees, who might be inclined to actually look at the facts rather than go along with the propaganda scree that Donald Trump is the Moscow candidate. Insert ominous music here. Now, further embarrassing the situation, Evelyn Farkas is an Obama administration insider. She's the latest Democrat to roll over, and she told MSNBC, yes, they were spying on Donald Trump, and she was helping the Obama administration spy on Trump, and that Trump, and not the Russians, was the target of all this illegal surveillance. The idea of we're investigating Russia, that was a cover story to try and make it seem quasi-legal and justifiable. And she's out there. This is an Obama insider saying, no, they had nothing to do with Russia. It was all about bugging Trump. Now, at this point, they've pretty much confirmed that the Obama administration was spying on Donald Trump during the transition, trying to get information on how to get people to prepare to push back against Donald Trump following the inauguration. The open question is how much spying was going on before the election to try and damage Donald Trump, help Hillary Clinton. That needs to be looked at. Now, as you know, the director of the FBI, James Comey, and the director of the National Security Agency, or as they like to call themselves, no such agency, Rogers, didn't show up today for their classified hearing. And this is absolutely insane. They have been called to testify in closed-door session where they're allowed to talk about classified information. They just didn't show up. They did not show up at all. Gee, I wonder if they have something to hide. They certainly act like it, don't they? They certainly act like there is something being hidden here. They're almost as totally wacko paranoid as the Israelis are about the history of World War II. Don't look at the facts, don't ask questions, don't analyze, don't think, just believe as we tell you to believe, and all will be well. Now, Chaffetz is out there saying that their investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server is being hindered by the State Department. So we can see, without even knowing what the big, ugly secret is, we know there's a big, ugly secret in there. Everybody is linking arms and joining forces, trying to basically keep the curtain drawn before you, the American people, because you're not supposed to know what the government is doing with your votes and with your money. Your job is just to sit there and work and give us wealth and breed new workers and soldiers and otherwise sit down and shut up, because that's the United States of fascist America today. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network. Now, Donald Trump has posed a very reasonable question. Why aren't these intelligence committees probing the Clintons? Because there's a lot more evidence of wrongdoing regarding the Clintons than there is about Donald Trump. And there's very clearly a bias going on here. What about the Hillary Clinton deal that allowed big uranium to go to Russia? Bill Clinton's money for Russian speeches, money to the Bill and Hillary Russian reset, Podesta's Russian company. There's a lot of stuff out there. Huge money went into the Clinton Foundation, in particular connected to the Uranium One deal. $5 million to Podesta's brother. No investigation there. Now, John Podesta, former head of Hillary Clinton's campaign, is facing prison because he broke federal law by concealing the fact that he owned tens of thousands of shares in a Russian bank. It was supposed to be on his financial disclosure forms. He did not disclose. He's hiding his own Russian connections. The Intelligence Committee ought to be looking at that. Now, John Podesta's brother, Tony, made $500,000 lobbying for a Chinese firm convicted of illegal arms sales to Iran. Why aren't they investigating that? The Podesta Group is up to their neck in all of this stuff. And Tony Podesta failed to register as a foreign agent when he represented a bank with ties to Russian spy agencies. That's where the dirt is, not Donald Trump, not Vladimir Putin. And the dirt is trying to protect itself. Don't look at us. Look at him. Hurt him. Don't go away from us here. Now, there's a very alarming article coming out of RINF.com, and normally I would have passed it over, except we're seeing a ramp-up of these staged booga-booga terrorist attacks. We're seeing a ramp-up of intrusions into the White House. And according to this article over in RINF.com, the deep state may be getting ready to implement what's called the Continuity of Government Plan. Now, this is a plan where the event of some kind of a catastrophe, the automated dictatorship takes on over, Congress gets sent home on vacation, and they basically run the country as a dictatorship for the duration of the national emergency, which will turn out, of course, to be, decades and decades and decades. And they're still out there pushing Russian hacking and so forth and so on. There's been another break-in, well, not break-in, but another incident at the White House. And apparently there was a man who claimed he had a bomb in a bag carrying outside the White House. The Secret Service did a lockdown on the White House. They took the man into custody. Apparently whatever was in the bag wasn't explosive, and the lockdown has been lifted. But we're seeing this, all these people getting into the White House, crawling over the fence like they're trying to get us used to the idea that Trump is vulnerable. Now, California's Congresswoman Maxine Waters is out there just screaming, we have to impeach Donald Trump. And she's got a long list of reasons. She's out there saying that Trump should be impeached because Putin supplied the bombs for Aleppo that killed children. That actually happened under Obama. Then Waters says Trump should be impeached because Russia hacked the DNC and exposed all the Democrats' lies. It's a bit of a reach there to say Trump had anything to do with that. And the most insane thing she is saying is Trump should be impeached because Putin invaded Korea. I'm sorry, Maxine, Putin has not invaded Korea. He's not even gotten close to Korea. But this seems to be what passes for politicians coming out of California. Maxine Waters, along with Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi. The other day I was talking about this possibility that the United States, because of prescription pharmaceuticals, was literally drugging itself into mental illness. And I think these three ladies are a perfect example of what I'm talking about. And they're not the only ones. Apparently Chuck Schumer was at a restaurant and all of a sudden took issue with the fact that one of the other restaurant patrons was a Trump supporter and literally went out over and launched into a tirade. How could you support Trump? He's a liar. He's a liar. She voted for Trump. And, you know, the argument went outside. And this guy just kept screaming at these people. They were just there for a dinner. And Schumer just launched on them. The government is dysfunctional. This kind of fanatical hysteria is a prelude to outright civil war. Now, a little bit of good news. As you know, I'm a big fan of Judge Napolitano, and he was recently pulled off from Fox News for the ultimate crime in the corporate media's eyes, which is telling the truth. And apparently, he has now been notified that he is on Donald Trump's list of potential Supreme Court nominees. If Gorsuch is not confirmed, and the Democrats are fighting back just over the turf war. Remember, when Gorsuch went up for his federal judgeship, not a single Democrat opposed him. But because he's Trump's nominee, they're fighting it tooth and nail. They're threatening filibusters. They're behaving like children. And if they succeed in blocking Gorsuch, they could wind up with Napolitano. I'd like to see Judge Napolitano on the Supreme Court. I really would. I really would here. Now, let's turn over to... Okay, we just lost our connection from RBN, and I don't know why. I don't know why we did. There we go. And we're back on the air, I assume, here. All right, so getting over to the war zones. Peace is returning to the streets of Aleppo finally. It may be one of the only quiet places left in Syria right now, but it's been pretty much devastated. People who had been to Aleppo before this U.S. attempt to oust Bashar al-Assad, remember, it was all olive groves, orange gardens, and just a beautiful, beautiful place. And now it's just been devastated. It looks like an aftermath of a war, as well it should. Meanwhile, up in the north of Syria, ISIS is counterattacking, trying to defend one of their last Syria strongholds. And we have Rex Tillerson is once more out there talking about the need to establish safe zones in Syria. And I expect that those safe zones are right along that edge where the U.S. wants to carve off a piece of Syria for the eventual Kurdistan. And at this point, given the cost to get here, it's hard to see what benefit a new Kurdistan is going to create other than to continue the policy of breaking up all the big nations in the Middle East into little nations that are easier to push around and bully. But they're back to this idea of safe zones. And little important point here, the United Nations is not talking about safe zones. Congress has not given Trump a declaration of war in Syria. And certainly Bashar al-Assad does not want the U.S. forces in there as well. This is an illegal war. This is naked aggression, and the U.S. is ramping things up again. They're sending hundreds of paratroopers into Mosul, down in Iraq, ramping up over there. And apparently Amnesty International is out there with an accusation that the hundreds of Mosul civilians, something like 200, killed in the last U.S. airstrike, were apparently told not to flee by authorities. They were told, stay there, get in this building, you'll be safe there. And apparently somebody messed up because that was the building the U.S. forces struck. Huge amounts of civilian deaths. And it's amazing to see the corporate media just crying all their crocodile tears for these people who were killed near Parliament, and then having absolutely no concern about the hundreds who are being killed in all these war zones. And we're not talking hundreds of soldiers, we're talking civilians. Men, women, and children who are not part of the armed forces of that nation. These are war crimes. And apparently Amnesty International is also saying there's an alarming pattern in the U.S.-led strikes in Iraq, where there appears to be a complete disregard for the possibility of civilian casualties. Over in Yemen, hundreds of thousands have risen up against the Saudi-U.S. invasion. The people of Yemen want to be in charge of the country of Yemen. The U.S. went in some years back, did a regime change. The people of Yemen did not like life under their foreign puppet rulers. They kicked the foreign puppet rulers out, and now the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are going back in with the internationally approved government to install. Now, little point of international law. Nowhere is a country allowed under any kind of international law or the UN Charter to decide what government another nation will have. In fact, if anything, the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights says everybody has a right to self-determination. Everybody has a right to have the government they choose to have. This label, the internationally approved government, is a hoax. It's a fraud. It's to try and make it look like there is some legitimacy to this imposed puppet ruler government that is being forced on the people of Yemen at the point of a bayonet. And there isn't any. There is no legal justification for it whatsoever. So far, more than 1,500 children have been killed in Yemen's war as it enters its third year. More than 10,000 people have been killed in the fighting, many of them civilians. This is all coming out of UNICEF. 2,400 children have been injured seriously. And of course, they're dealing with this major famine over there as well from the Saudi blockade. Kill civilians, starve the population into submission. Does this sound like any kind of democratization process? Does this sound like humanitarian war? Or is it a classic war of conquest? Now, Dick Cheney is out there saying that Russia's U.S. election interference should be considered an act of war. It's an act of war. We have to get on back. And, well, if you feel that way, Dick, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, watch your head climbing into that transport. We'll call Putin and tell him you're on your way to kick his butt all by yourself. And, of course, Putin's got nothing to worry about given Dick Cheney's history of inaccuracies with his shotgun. He's trying to shoot a goose, shot his lawyer instead. Now, John McCain is out there pushing the same thing. The Russian cyber intrusions are an act of war. When you attack a country, it's an act of war. And we have to make sure there's a price to pay. So basically what we have here is Dick Cheney and John McCain want you to go and kill people they don't like. Isn't that what they locked up Charlie Manson for doing? Sending other people out to kill people he didn't like? We're going to take a phone call. No, actually we're going to take a commercial break, then we're going to take a phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, on Dick Cheney and John McCain and the Clintons, the Bushes, it's all that oligarchy, man. You know, look at Chelsea Clinton. She got paid $26,000 for every minute for 58 minutes working on a project for NBC. Think about this. $26,000 for every minute for 58 minutes. And I want all Americans to see how much they get paid every minute.
Well, this is just a legal way of bribing a candidate to curry political favor. The same thing with book deals. Is you'll give somebody like a huge book deal with a huge advance, and the book doesn't really sell, and you wind up taking a loss. But it's a legal way of bribing people.
And Mike, what's the difference between an oligarchy and a plutocracy? Is it close to be the same?
It's pretty much the same. Both of them refer to systems where control and power are concentrated at the top. I think the only difference is that the oligarchy tends to be a little bit more open and honest, that they're doing it to enrich themselves at the expense of everybody else. Whereas a plutocracy sort of at least tries to maintain the illusion that they are working for the people. But there's a lot of crossover there. A tyrant by any other name would stink as bad.
This is true. And Mike, on Fox News, I was watching on YouTube, they showed, you know, like the Trump fights going on between the Antifa group, and there was one in Seaside, New Jersey the other day. I was like, wow, so it's actually, you know, it's moving. It's growing. Well,
some of these Antifa thugs are facing felony charges now for their actions. There was a video we actually have linked to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com where apparently one of these anti-Trump groups showed up fully armed with like major heavy weapons. And where are the gun grabbers when you really need them to be around? Because some of these weapons look like they were definitely over the top. But again, we're seeing a system where, you know, it's okay for them to behave this way, but not okay for you. And it's another sign that we have descended into tyranny and dictatorship.
Can this be the next shot heard around the world? You know, with them packing guns, we're packing guns, and obviously George Soros is pushing these people. And there's another group, Black Bloc. You ever heard of them?
Yeah, I heard about them.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is moving to date because, like one of your previous callers, I think yesterday said, you know, in May, they're going to be out in force, you know. I really think they are because that's where they're moving. They're going to use these foot soldier, brown shirt people to cause a lot of problems.
It almost feels like we're building towards something. It's not here yet. But just on a gut level, it just feels like they're pushing for some kind of a color revolution or a coup d'etat or a civil war or something. And be careful what you wish for. I finally decided I was going to arm up, so I bought myself a new gun. It's not really very effective, but it does have lots of pretty colored lights all over it. Anyway, we're going to let you go, Dustin. Need to get back to the news here. And before we talk about civil war, or world war, or any war indeed, there's a very hard historical reality we all need to keep in mind. When two nations or two groups decide to go into conflict with each other, both sides are convinced they will ultimately win because right is on their side, the gods favor them, whatever it's going to be. But as history has shown, half of those people are going to be wrong. Half of every leader who decides they want to go to war and are convinced they're going to win are wrong. Now, there's no question the U.S. has had a really good track record. Our military supporters like to say we've never lost a war, not counting Vietnam, but it's important to understand that the United States has not always won its wars all by itself. We were on the winning side in World War I, and we were on the winning side again in World War II. In fact, we sort of waited until it was obvious which side was going to win, and then we hopped on board. But there's a danger in overconfidence, and we're going to talk about that when we come back from this next break for our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the dangers of overconfidence. And again, to recap, every leader who takes his nation to war tells his people victory is certain, and history has shown half of them are going to turn out wrong. Just keep that in mind as you hear all this talk about war with Russia, war with China, war with Yemen, war with Syria. If you look how poorly the U.S. is performing, it's stuck in these quagmires in Iraq and Afghanistan. This was all supposed to be over and done with by 2008. So you have to be careful about being overconfident. And so there's this article over at Zero Hedge which is reminding us all of the story of Civil War General John Sedgwick. Now, he was a Union general, and during the 1864 Battle of Spotsylvania in Virginia, he was sitting on his horse on a ridgeline with his officers around him, observing distant Confederate troops, and one of his subordinates said, "Don't you think you should get under cover?" And Sedgwick said they couldn't hit an elephant at this distance, at which point he was shot in the face and died. Now, anybody who's a student of the Civil War knows this story because it is the perfect illustration of overconfidence and hubris. And yes, given that during the Civil War they were using round ball and smoothbore barrels, it was just a random lucky shot. But we need to keep that in mind because luck does come into it a great deal. During the war in the Pacific, during World War II, the U.S. won the Battle of Midway primarily through luck. The dive bombers literally stumbled over the Japanese carriers just when their decks were loaded with bombs. The deck was crowded, they couldn't launch or recover, and blew it up. Midway could have gone the other way. In fact, many years ago, I worked with a computer simulation of the Battle of Midway, and the Japanese kept winning that. It's not a given that we will win in these coming wars. In fact, I think we're probably going to lose because of the high cost and ill-suitability of our current generation of weapons. Now then, I was just coming back from commercial. I was looking on the TV. Apparently, along with calls for him to step down, Nunes is being challenged to reveal his sources for all this information about how Obama was spying on Donald Trump for political gain. And Nunes is saying, no, I need to keep my sources confidential. And, of course, the Democrats are going ballistic. Well, how are we supposed to know who to assassinate and dump in Fort Marcy Park if you won't tell us? All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Errol in the Netherlands. Errol, aloha. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello. Aloha, Mike. You speak with Errol from Netherlands. How are you?
I'm doing fine. What is on your mind today?
My mind is today, I listened to your radio show yesterday about vaccinations. And a very important thing I want you to notice, I can send you my own vaccination card that I had. My mother gave it to me. My mother is now 78 years old. And my mother gave it to me, she said, because you need to know this, because this is very important. It is the DKTP. It's a Detarifus, Kinkus, Tetanus, and Polio vaccine. Mm-hmm. And I got it, the first shot. It's registered. I can send you that.
Well, you can. Okay, two things. First of all, we do the vaccine news in hour number 3, and I got a whole bunch to share with everybody. Second of all, when you and I were younger, the vaccine companies were still liable for civil action if they made a mistake. And so back when you and I got the few vaccinations we got, they were still being very careful that they were safe and effective, and they weren't just dumping whatever they felt like into them. It's a very different story. All of the problems that we're seeing about vaccines in our current age are all a result of the indemnification of the vaccine industry against any kind of civil litigation. Now, some people are trying to break through that and establish a degree of recklessness that should void the indemnification, but it's a big political fight here, and it's all about the money. Anyway, listen, Errol, I'm going to let you go. If you want to call back in hour 3, go ahead, but I really want to stay sort of on topic here for this portion of the show here. Now, Russia is responding to all these allegations coming from U.S. war hawks that Russia could attack, Russia could do this, Russia could do that, by reminding everybody that right now at the moment, U.S. radars cover almost all the Russian territory. Russia is admitting they can't launch anything without the United States military knowing about it. And they're beginning to express a concern that these radars are so powerful, they actually pose a threat to non-military space flight in low Earth orbit, including the ISS. because these are very, very powerful radars. And a lot of the systems on satellites are just not built to resist being zorched by these beams. And they're urging a little bit of caution. Yes, have the radars, but just be aware that they could be a danger. We've got the ISS up there. China's getting ready to launch a manned space station. And there's all kinds of stuff in low Earth orbit that serves a benign purpose. Communication satellites, weather satellites, research satellites. And they're all at risk if they have one of these high-powered radar beams dwell on them long enough. It's going to cook the interior. Now then, as you know, Israel carried out an airstrike on Syria. Syria fought back. I'm sure Netanyahu was saying, what, they can shoot back? Are they allowed to do that? Are they allowed to shoot back? When did that happen? It's rattled the entire Middle East. It's reminded everybody that Israel is an aggressor into its neighboring countries. And everybody's very concerned about the escalating war of words between Israel, Syria, and Russia, leading to the announcement by Syria that if Israel bombs Syrian territory again, Syria will attack Israel with Scud missiles. And that could be a flashpoint for a regional war. And if that should happen, please keep in mind who started it. Our corporate media will say it's all Assad's fault or it's all Putin's fault. It isn't. Now then, they're really ramping up the propaganda about North Korea. Now, Vincent Brooks, he's the commander of the United States forces in Korea, is telling the Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop that North Korea has developed a rocket that could hit Canberra in a nuclear strike. Booga booga, booga booga, be afraid, be afraid. Can anybody think of a reason why North Korea would want to attack Australia? Are they like allergic to koalas? So why is the important part? It's like when they said Assad is gassing his own people. Oh, it's horrible. Why would he do that? I don't know. That's what tells you it's a lie here. Now, North Korea has carried out another rocket engine test. And the U.S. is wagging its finger. This could be part of a program to develop a new ICBM. Could also be part of their non-military space program. North Korea is launching satellites. In fact, they want to sell that as a service to other countries. Actually, I think the U.S. is just annoyed at Korea because we can't build our own rocket engines anymore. We have to buy them from Russia. And here's little North Korea able to build rocket engines when the United States no longer can. I think that's really what's going on here. A little bit of jealousy there. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Malcolm in New Mexico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Welcome from the land of enchantment. I have a question for you. I figure you could probably answer this because this was just something on my mind way back when I was living in Austin. I worked with someone who went to Israel. He was a Jew, and he went with a team of American people who were also Jewish. And they went around Israel, and they had somebody with Israeli IDF that toured with them for their safety and so forth. Mm-hmm. And every now and then he held something up in the air, and it was like a flashlight. It was during the day, and this friend of mine, he asked somebody, what was that all about? And he said that he's flashing a satellite. And I'm like, well, Israel doesn't have any satellites. So they go, oh, yes, they do.
Sure they do.
And I'm just wondering, it just occurred to me, if Israel's working with us and they work with the NSA a lot, they're probably using our satellites. And I'm thinking, wouldn't that be a way to get around the Fourth Amendment if you wanted to get information on somebody?
Well, that's what Echelon and Five Eyes have been doing since the 1980s. Each of the member countries of the Echelon program, they spy on the citizens of the other guys' countries, then they trade the data so that they can say, we're in compliance with the law. We're not spying on our own citizens. These other countries are spying on our citizens, and we can't enforce our privacy laws against them. It's an old scam, and they've been doing it. But Israel has unfiltered access to all of the take from the NSA, and we can presume probably other intelligence resources as well. But Israel does have its own satellites. They're launched by third-party nations or third-party countries, but Israel does have its own surveillance satellites.
So they can essentially spy on U.S. citizens for the NSA, and they don't have to worry about getting a judge's order.
Well, a lot of people overestimate what can be seen from a spy satellite in orbit. And most of the NSA spying is done with the built-in spy system in our tablets, cell phones, and computers. The use of imaging from orbit is to look for structures and stuff being built. Because of the atmospheric realities, there is no telescope in orbit that can look down and recognize a human on the ground. It's just too blurry to do. It's really very good. The adaptive optics technology that is now making its way into astronomy circles was actually developed for one of the later keyhole satellites. And along with that, there are the electronic intercept satellites like the Rhyolite series. But I think NSA does all their spying pretty much by just having taps into our phone lines, our computer lines. In fact, we have an article that we link to whatreallyhappened.com. Somebody has actually set up a website where if you go and visit and you click on it, it traces out all the routes of communication going from your computer and which ones are going through NSA listening stations.
But still, I mean, technically, you still have to get a judge's order if you want to listen to somebody. I mean, even though they are gathering all this information to go to San Antonio and Utah and so forth, if you want to zero in on someone, you still need a judge's order for that.
Well, that's what they keep telling us, but we're finding out more and more that people are accessing this intelligence inappropriately. The FISA court hardly ever refuses a request for a warrant. One notable recent exception being the warrant for Donald Trump. They turned that one down flat. So it's all illusion. I mean, the FISA court really doesn't do anything. It's not a safeguard, because anytime somebody says, I want to spy on Michael Rivero and Claire, his wife, the FISA court will say, yeah, sure, go ahead. It's not a problem. So they're trying to make it look like there's some kind of legal limits or restrictions or controls, but in point of fact, there aren't.
Oh, these are scary times we live in. Anyway, thanks a lot, Mike. I'll let you go. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to George in Texas, and then we're going to close the phone lines for a little while because I got a bunch of stuff to get to. George, what's on your mind?
Howdy, Mike. You know, hearing about the deep state, it's ingrained in all the bureaucracies, and they're pretty much ignoring what Donald Trump wants done in his political appointments at the cabinet level. And you know, the thing is, you hear about this continuity of government. Well, the truth is, you know, talking to some police officers, they're not going to go along with it in this continuity. I don't think the military is going to go along with it. And the continuity government depends on these elements in government to go along with it. And I don't really think they're going to go along with it.
Well, I said back before when it looked like Soros was trying to kick up a color revolution in this country, I said the part that he's missing is that for a color revolution to be successful, the general population must believe that the revolutionaries are organic from among their own people, and that they have a legitimate grievance, and that things will be better following the color revolution. It's never happened, by the way. Following all these color revolutions, everything gets worse for the targeted country, because it's not really a revolution, it's a coup d'etat and the installation of puppet rulers. So here in this country, nobody's buying into the color revolution, the Black Lives Matter, the Antifa, or anything. In fact, the more and more they behave like brown shirts, the more and more ordinary Americans are saying, these people are a problem, they are not a solution. And if they continue to push along this direction, I'm in agreement. They could trigger an outright civil war, and nobody's going to come out victorious from that.
Well, and also, too, I would recommend President Trump don't be in Washington early May, and plus, Congress, please adjourn for that first week in May. You know, because I heard they're going to be bringing in people to try to recreate the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution on May Day.
Well, maybe. We'll see how far they get, but I'll tell you right now, Donald Trump has got to stop being defensive. He's got to stop thinking that he can run the White House as a business. He's got to show some leadership. He's got to break out. He's got to go on the offense. And he's got to regain the initiative, or they are going to succeed in getting him out of office. That's very clearly what they want to do.
Well, thank you, Mike. I'll let you move on to the news.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to close the phone lines for a while. I'll announce when they're reopened again here. Let's talk about the economic news, because there's a major development out there where Russia and China are laying the groundwork for transactions within BRICS to be conducted in gold. No more ink and paper, no more fantasy money typed into a computer. They're basing their new transnational economic system on a gold basis. And the Federal Reserve is not going to like that one little bit. But the Federal Reserve has a more pressing problem. Do you remember back when Ron Paul created a bill to mandate a full and complete audit of the Federal Reserve? It just passed the House panel and is going to go to the floor of the Congress, and the Federal Reserve is absolutely screaming about it. The last time it looked like this bill could actually come up for a vote, the Federal Reserve literally threatened to crash the economy if anybody tried to audit their books and find out just how much they have made off the backs of the American people for the last 100 years. That's a number they do not want you to know. They're absolutely terrified when you find out how much these private central bankers have made from the enslavement of the American people through this public currency created out of thin air and loaned into circulation at interest. The American people would be furious, and they should be furious. So, we're going to come up here on another commercial break leading to the top of the hour. When we come on back, more interesting, financially linked, sort of, kind of, maybe it was a suicide, but I don't believe it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. So, do you remember Bernie Madoff with the loot? Incredibly rich man, co-founder of NASDAQ, classic money junkie. It still wasn't enough, so he set up this little Ponzi scheme, and he defrauded his investors and even his own employees out of something like $60 billion, much of which has never been recovered. And, of course, the taxpayers were forced to help make good on all of that. And apparently, Charles W. Murphy, hedge fund executive, supposedly leapt to his death in Midtown Manhattan yesterday. And he was 56 years old, fell 20 floors before he landed on the 4th floor terrace. Now, Murphy used to be an executive with Fairfield Greenwich Group, Bernie Madoff's biggest feeder fund, with $7 billion of clients' money invested. And here's where it gets kind of interesting. Murphy is the 4th person connected to Madoff to supposedly commit suicide. Isn't it interesting that the more crooked Wall Street becomes, the more and more we start seeing suspicious deaths? People would have the inside information to either find where certain money's disappeared to or lead to certain prosecutions, and they get horribly depressed. They're just so depressed, and they just fling themselves off the buildings. I'm not buying this one. And remember, in the United States, the legal process is, in all cases of unattended death, the presumption is homicide. Suicide must be proven. That's the way it normally works, and that's another reason why the death of Vince Foster was so suspicious. So many things wrong with the suicide story, but, oh yeah, it has to be suicide. You know, you have to prove he was murdered. No, homicide is the presumption under law. You have to prove suicide, and you failed to do it. Now then, do you remember when Trump came on in and was talking about revitalizing our economy? And one of the things he promised when he allowed these pipelines to start moving forward, he said, we're going to use American steel and American steel pipes, which we know are going to be able to resist leaking. And apparently Republicans are blocking or blocked the legislation to use American steel in order to benefit foreign steel companies. These Republicans, who are supposed to be on the side of Donald Trump, are out there saying, oh, we can't buy American. We'll harm those foreign steel companies. They're such really good friends of ours, and so we're going to keep the American steel industry down. We're going to leave all these American steel workers unemployed because really that would just not be fair to these foreign steel companies. Beginning to sound like liberals, aren't they? Over in Baltimore, their mayor just vetoed a bill that would have guaranteed a $15 an hour minimum wage, and proving that the corporate wing of the Democratic Party is alive and well. We're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the economic news here. And one of the pieces of propaganda that was being put forward by the Open Borders people, by the people supporting the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership or the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was that trade isn't going to kill America's manufacturing jobs. No. It's just going to be more opportunities here. It's not going to affect the American manufacturing at all. Well, obviously they're lying. American manufacturing has been in decline for over 30 years, and it has been accelerating ever since all this free trade, open borders stuff began. And over at RINF.com, they have an article saying that studies are showing, yes, trade really did kill America's manufacturing jobs. And if the American people do not have jobs, if they are not able to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, then they are not going to go into the shopping malls and buy new microwave ovens. They are not going to go into the dealerships and buy new cars. They are not going to buy new homes. They simply can't. And that's why our economy is shutting down. That's why we're looking at the retail Mageddon, 3,500 stores getting ready to close. And why our economic planners do not see that is absolutely stunning. Now, as you know, the Ryan Care failed primarily through obstructionists in Congress who voted against it, not because it was just Obamacare light, which it was, but again, more of the turf war, the same thing they were doing with Gorsuch. They're making all their decisions based on gotchas against each other, Republican versus Democrat, Democrat versus Republican. That's not a decent way to run a country. It's not a practical way to run a country. It's not a prudent, wise way to run a country. It is the ideal course to create chaos. And now, of course, everybody is talking about a possible government shutdown on April 29th. And that Trump may not be able to stop it. Why? Because the Democrats are going to oppose any measure that Donald Trump is in favor of. Now, right now, polls are showing most Americans want a completely different health care system, not just a refinement of Obamacare. They want a public option. They want a single payer. They want anything that they see working in other countries. And Bernie Sanders is pushing for a public option. And Wendell Potter, who's a health insurance executive turned whistleblower, is saying the Democrats are going to derail that. Because after all, it's Obamacare. It's the highlight of the Obama administration. It's part of his legacy. We can't touch it. It's like a statue to his memory. We have to keep it going. Alrighty, now as you know, Donald Trump is still fighting the good fight over his travel ban. The corporate media is still insisting it's a Muslim ban. No, it isn't. It's a ban on unrestricted travel from specific countries. The president is allowed to do that under Title VIII. The law is on Trump's side in this case. Now it has come on out. Newly leaked documents from the Department of Homeland Security are revealing that the judges who blocked President Trump's travel ban based their decisions solely on fake news they were seeing on TV. Oh, it's a Muslim ban. It's this. Apparently the judges didn't even actually read Trump's executive order because the word Muslim doesn't even appear in it. And if you are coming to the United States from one of the countries on that list, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Jewish, Christian, atheist, Pastafarian, Scientologist, it doesn't matter. You will have the same degree of difficulty getting vetted to be allowed into this country. It's not a Muslim ban. That's an absolute fabrication, and apparently these liberal judges, especially out there at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, just went along with it. And that's dereliction of duty, when you're not doing your due diligence so that you actually know what the issue is. that you read the source documents. You don't just take some media talking head's word for it. Some prostitute or correspondent says, oh, it's a Muslim ban, it's discriminatory, and the judge says, oh yeah, that sounds good to me. We'll rule against it. And by doing so, the judges are in fact undermining public trust in the justice system itself when they see such rulings being made on such a casual, reckless basis. Anyway. Now then, over in North Carolina, in Jerusalem Township, they had a horrible traffic accident where 3 people were killed. And as it turns out, the driver, Alejandro Ramirez Jaramillo, was an illegal immigrant. So, once again, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining the network here. More Syrian refugees over in Germany start a street riot chanting Aloha Snack Bar, Aloha Snack Bar, Aloha Snack Bar. Police had to go in to stop the riot. Paris is in chaos again. Riots between the refugees who want Paris to look like wherever it is they came from, and the Parisians who like their city just the way it is. And you're not seeing this being reported on the corporate media either. Somewhere along the line, all these refugees being flooded into Europe were told it's okay for you to go into Europe and turn Europe into the mirror of the country you're running away from, which to me doesn't make any sense. If I were leaving the United States in its current state of decline and going to, for example, Australia, and I got to Australia, the last thing I'm going to want to do is turn Australia into America in its current state. What did the Australians ever do to me to deserve that kind of thing? But we're seeing it all over the place. Now, Sweden, which is very liberal, they've got a feminist government. They're doing some very weird things over there. And apparently they've had enough of the refugee problem, and they wanted to send 5,000 of their illegal Muslim refugees back to Hungary where they'd crossed over from. And Hungary is refusing to take them back, and now Sweden is threatening to sue, saying this is your problem, not our problem. Remember the game of hot potato when you were a kid? That's what the refugees in Europe have become, the hot potato. Everybody's passing it around, nobody wants to get stuck with it. I have an idea. Send them back home. That'll solve the problem. They don't want to go back home? Well, that's easy. Just stop the U.S. bombing all the countries they came from. They'll go back home. Now, as you know, we have over 100 jurisdictions from Manhattan to Malibu who are maintaining a sanctuary city status. Apparently out in Malibu, nobody's lawns get done or nobody's babies get looked after without the illegal immigrants. And all of these 100-plus jurisdictions are refusing to allow federal enforcement of the immigration laws. And one of the big problems is that these illegal immigrants will be arrested for committing crimes, and immigration will say, we're going to come on over and pick them up, and they'll be released before federal law enforcement can grab them for deportation. Now, these governments are all labeling themselves sanctuary cities, but as this article over in Breitbart correctly points out, they should be called secessionist cities. They're defying federal law, Title VIII. Because liberals are above the law. We know what's best for everybody else, therefore we're going to do this. Now, over in Massachusetts, finally a little bit of common sense. Bristol County Sheriff Thomas Hodgson was testifying before the House Subcommittee on Illegal Immigration, saying that the leaders of these sanctuary cities ought to be arrested right now. They're in direct violation of Title VIII of the U.S. Code. federal arrest warrant should be issued for all these elected officials. There's no sovereign immunity for a governor or a mayor. And he also took aim at Massachusetts Representative Michelle Dubois, who apparently was out warning illegal immigrants in Massachusetts in a Facebook post of coming ICE raids. ICE is going to be raiding, so she literally issued a warning to the illegal immigrants: if you are undocumented, don't go out on the street. If there's a knock on the door of your house and you don't know who it is, don't open the door. That's giving aid to the illegal immigrants, harboring and encouraging them to be illegal immigrants. That's a Title VIII violation. She could go to jail for 5 years for every count. And if she's encouraging the illegal immigrants and protecting them on the belief that they're going to vote for her, then that's personal profit. That ramps up the penalty to 10 years per count. Remember the story we had yesterday where Democrats are giving out gift baskets to illegal immigrants in which is already a voter registration form. Illegal immigrants are not allowed to register to vote. They're not allowed to vote. And the Democrats are saying, go ahead, fill it out, fill it out, fill it out. We need to take back the White House and the Congress, and we need you illegals to do it. Now, finally, a little bit of common sense. The state of Mississippi has become the first state to comprehensively ban sanctuary cities. This is being enforced from the state level. Any mayors that are going to resist immigration law are going to be in trouble at the state as well as the federal level. And, of course, immediately the open borders people are out there saying, well, of course, Mississippi would ban the sanctuary cities. They were at the heart of slavery and racism and blah, 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 blah. And we're still getting that. Anybody opposed to open borders is being racist. Anybody opposed to illegal immigration is being racist. I have a clue for you, liberal morons. Illegal isn't a race. Now, Judicial Watch, which continues to do yeoman work on so many fronts, has launched their own petition. We have it linked to the front of whatreallyhappened.com, and I do hope you'll take a moment to sign it, basically saying, end illegal immigration now. And by signing this petition, you put down what state you're from. They're going to send all the signatures to the governor of your state. And the petition simply says, enforce the nation's immigration law. And the globalists are very, very upset here. Now then, over in the European Union, as you know, just a few days ago, on the 25th, the leaders of the 27 EU member states signed a declaration to restart the European Union. We are pledging ourselves to the Union. We know there's been problems, but we pledge that things are going to get better. The only problem was they didn't actually have any ideas on how to make things better. They're admitting they've made mistakes. They don't have any solutions. And the interpretation is that this declaration to restart is pure theater, pure public relations, trying to convince the people of Europe that everything's going to be hunky-dory when the people of Europe can look out their own doors and windows and see, no, there are some problems. It is heading toward a collapse. It's heading toward a breakup. And the latest one is coming from Italy. The five-star movement, which is Eurosceptic pro-exit, is surging into poll leads, sending more shockwaves through Brussels. Brussels is out there saying, how many elections are we going to have to rig to hold this thing together? They're fighting a losing battle. People do not want a one-world government. I mean, look at the government of large nations like, well, the United States. How corrupt they've become. How abusive they've become. A global government would only be that much worse because there would be no alternative, would there? And that's a major reason why I am against a single global government. It will be the end of the evolution of human civilization. All governments want to preserve the status quo, what works for them. We're seeing our current government literally trying to drag us out of the 21st century back to the golden age of the Cold War of the 1950s and 1960s. So imagine that on a global scale, where there's no alternative. And that's one of the major reasons I'm opposed to a global government. I think human civilization and humankind are best served by a planet with 1,000 little tiny nations, all about the same size, each taking care of their own people. And yes, there'll be some cross-border trade, and there'll be a lot of tourism. But you won't see the rise of these empires that inevitably cause so much pain and suffering around the world. Take a look at what the United States is doing in the Middle East right now, if you need an example. Now, as you know, Scotland is kind of in play. They're talking about a new independence referendum, ostensibly in response to the Brexit. And they're talking about we're going to break away from Britain and go back to being part of the EU. That may have changed, because all of a sudden there's been a major oil find off the Scottish coast. And all of a sudden Scotland is saying, well, if we break free from Great Britain and we don't join the EU, we're going to be looking pretty good economically with all this new oil and gas. And the find is estimated at 1 billion barrels. And it's huge. Scottish oil has been yielding 25 million barrels in recent years. Now they're talking about 1 billion down there. And Scotland is now all of a sudden realizing they're going to be better off as an independent Scotland. I was beginning to wonder if William Wallace had lived and died in vain when Scotland was talking about rejoining the slavery of the European Union. But that may not be happening. Poor old John McCain, the warmonger, he's out there wringing his hands and he's crying his tears and saying, the New World Order is under enormous strain. Let's all feel bad for the global tyranny and dictatorship. We have to pledge our allegiance to the global tyranny. McCain obviously sees his own rear end as a potential occupant of the single golden throne of planet Earth. We're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines now, 800-313-9443. The other day I was talking about the militant feminism of the 1990s and how the message they were putting out back then was not that women had the option of going into the business world, but that women were obligated to do it. Stay-at-home moms were looked down on. They were shunned. The feminists wanted all women to go into that workforce. You don't have a choice anymore. We're going to tell you what's best for you. You will go in. And now, talk about timing. Apparently down in Australia, one of their journalists in their equivalent of the corporate media is out there opining it should be illegal to be a stay-at-home mom. They actually want to criminalize women who want to stay home, raise their own kids, take care of their house. And why is that? Well, it's very simple. If both parents are working, that's more opportunities for taxation. If both parents are working, then you're going to stimulate the economy by having to have child care and home care. But most important, if both parents are working, then the children's minds are wide open to being propagandized by the school and by the corporate media, with no restraining voices whatsoever. And that's what's been behind this big push to convince single-parent homes to be no-parent homes. All right, we're going to take, we're coming up on a commercial break. We've got a caller waiting on the line. And when we come on back, we'll deal with that here. The PC stuff is just getting out of control. Apparently, the University of Regina has set up a masculinity confession booth where you can confess. I confess I'm masculine. I'm very happy with it, too, by the way. These people are getting weird. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about some of this PC nonsense that's out there. University of Regina has a masculinity confession booth where you can confess the sin of being masculine. I don't think it's a sin at all. I'm rather pleased with it. But I mean, that's how ridiculous. And you know, the question I have is, These kids have gone hideously into student loan debt to go to these universities, and they're getting their heads filled with this nonsense. What employer in their right mind is going to be hiring any of these graduates? No wonder they want the H-1B visas. Get people from other countries who are well-trained, have job skills, don't have their brains melted on political correctness and prescription antidepressants. Now, over at Loyola University Chicago, they have a self-identified whites space where you can go and feel guilty. It's a campus club for self-identified white students to admit they're racist. This is starting to remind me of all those rape crisis centers that were all over the universities in the 1990s. Most of which went completely, totally unused because there wasn't really a rape epidemic. It was ginned up to push feminist speakers and feminist books and all the rest of it. There is a book called Who Stole Feminism by Christine Hobbs Sommers, herself a feminist, bemoaning how the original equal pay for equal work, equal access to education and credit, which we all got on board with that. That was perfectly fine. But that got hijacked by this male bash militant feminism that basically undermined a lot of the good that the original feminist movement really did. Okay, we're going to start taking phone calls here. Robert in Sacramento, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I think yesterday you were talking about antidepressants, especially about paroxetine.
Yes.
I guess it's generic for Paxil.
Yes.
Yeah. I got started on Paxil. Background on that reason I got started on antidepressants, especially Paxil, because I was living in a very abusive household, and I was literally homeless, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I had nowhere to go. And so, you know, I finally my mom found some place, and I stayed there. And then I was telling her, you know, I'm really, you know, depressed. I'm angry because of all the, you know, situation I was in. And she said, oh, okay, let's take you to the doctor. And I went to the doctor, and he prescribed me Paxil. And I was like under 18. I was like 17 years old. Now I'm 34. And the doctor put me on Paxil, which is paroxetine. You were talking about that yesterday.
Yes.
And suddenly I just, you know, I was taking that, and I basically flipped out. I wanted to kill myself, literally. Basically what I did was I took all the medication I could find from the cupboards, and, you know, Paxil, some other stuff, and I just took that, and I wanted to commit suicide. I took all this medication, and I drank it all to, you know, because I don't know, just it popped in my head, you know, fuck this. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know, I said, forget this. So I took all these medications, and they put me in the hospital. And I was constantly moving, and then, you know, I barely graduated high school, and we moved on, you know, to another city. And what you were talking about, paroxetine, is very true. It's a very bad drug. And I think I sent you a couple of emails. I was talking about, you know, antidepressants, and I was hoping to try to get off of them, but there's no way. There's literally no way. I'm just stuck with them for life, basically.
Well, I would disagree with that last part. It could be hard to get off of them, and you have to do it gradually. But it can be done. Certainly when I had my bad experience, fortunately I was only on the meds for about 5 weeks total. And so at the end of that 5 weeks when I had my bad experience, I was able to just throw them away and say, I am not touching these things again. The longer you are on, the harder it is to get off. But the sooner you get off, the better. Anyway, Robert, I'm glad you survived, and we're going to have to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, then we're going to get back to the news for a while. Betty in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I am going to post a blog to the president and say that Judge Roy Moore of Georgia Supreme Court Justice has earned, as the Patrick Henry of our generation, the nomination for the federal Supreme Court position.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
I don't know Judge Moore, so I really can't say.
So you ought to go look him up. He is the Patrick Henry of our generation.
Well, does he tend to be conservative or liberal?
Conservative.
Okay, because what we really need is a replacement for Judge
That's
Scalia.
the kind he is.
Well,
That's
okay,
the kind
good.
He is. Well, I'm amazed that he has not been nominated. It just astounds me. And thank you for taking my call.
All right, you're welcome. We're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I would just want to consider something here, and that is maybe this. I don't believe this is the deep state that's happening right now. I believe this is just the state. This is the nature of the state as it is, as we just have not seen it before. It's just been hidden. It's been hidden from view, and now it's come out in the open. But it was apparent to me when Clapper and Comey did not show up to the Congress the other day that they're not beholden to Congress, to people. They're beholden to nobody. And maybe they haven't been for a long time, and maybe we can trace it back even further when they bugged their own oversight committee on the torture report, remember?
Oh, yeah, they were breaking into the computers and deleting information. They were deleting evidence. Yeah.
Very people that were supposed to overwatch them, and they were crapping on them. And it's apparent, really, that they run everything. With this total surveillance state, that those guys run everything. And honestly, it will take an infantry battalion surrounding the FBI headquarters and CIA and going in and arresting these guys, and that's what it's going to take.
You know, right from the very beginning, I was telling Donald Trump, instead of draining the swamp, just drone the swamp, because it's going to be a lot cheaper and easier.
Like, this is scary, man.
It is.
This is very scary.
They're
just thumbing their nose. Yeah,
they are. But again, those of us who've been studying this for a very, very long time know that this has been a pattern going way, way back. I mean, the CIA operation running guns and drugs out of Arkansas, that was a rogue operation. The fact that the CIA was bringing opium back from Vietnam was a rogue operation. It was certainly not sanctioned by the U.S. civilian leadership. Even Harry Truman in his memoirs said that if he had known what the CIA was going to turn into, he never would have allowed its creation.
Well, my contention is that these people have superseded a civilian leadership. They're above and beyond any control whatsoever.
Well, that's how they see themselves. Yeah, that's how they see themselves. I mean, again, look what happened to John F. Kennedy. They are a danger to the nation, as we were taught the nation is supposed to be. It's a surveillance state, a covert police state, and it is a major problem. The good news is now everybody knows about it.
Yeah, that's true. It's amazing to see also, Mike, how guys like Schumer and McCain and the papers and the networks, are shaking out, and who really controls them as well.
Well, again, if the NSA and the CIA are able to just get into your personal information, nobody reaches that high in our society without having taken some shortcuts or let their ego get the better of them and done some things that probably they shouldn't have. And once the NSA and the CIA has that, they own you. They absolutely own you. They're able to blackmail you.
One more point, Mike, and that is also it's become quite apparent that with all the things that have been going on around the world and the funding sources, that George Soros is also controlled by these guys to a very large extent.
I think there's probably more of a partnership than a control going on there, because Soros genuinely believes in this idea of a new world order global government.
Well, he's definitely acting as their tool, and you don't act as their tool without their guiding hand.
Well, I'll agree with you on one thing. I think the phrase deep state is inaccurate. I think it's a phrase that's crafted to sell the idea that it is unreachable to we the people, when in point of fact it is simply that bureaucratic inertia. These career bureaucrats in the government, they love things just the way they are. They are very resistant to change. They love their higher than private sector salaries. They love the fact that they don't have to do a whole heck of a lot for that money. They don't want anything to change at all.
I don't know, man. And then, Mike, there's a whole other area of Congress exempting themselves from insider trading laws, sexual harassment laws, God knows what other laws that they've exempted.
It's hardly the Congress. Out in California, their Senate just exempted California's legislature from California's own gun laws. They literally passed a law saying you cannot have these magazines, you cannot have these rifles, but we can.
Is that, I live in California. I didn't know that. Is that right? Really?
Yeah, that's right. Well, they're not going to admit that on the local news. They don't want you to know that stuff. Apparently, Feinstein had something to do with this.
Oh, my God.
Okay.
Well, Mike, that's it for me. Thanks, guys.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Now then, there has been another one of these incidents of a gentleman who's convinced he's really a woman using the women's restroom. This was at Disneyland back on the 13th. And it's kicked off a huge stink because people in general are feeling this has gone way too far. And Disneyland needs to look at what happened to Target when they adopted their restroom policy. And Disneyland already is no longer the happiest kingdom on earth. The very last time Claire and I were in Los Angeles, we were going to go to Disneyland because we hadn't been there for a long time. And I have a very strong memory of Disneyland as it was when I was a kid. And after the Disneys lost control and Eisner took over, all of the unique individual stores were basically shut down, and it just became one long wall of branded merchandise. But I remember Claire and I went down to Disneyland in Anaheim, and we were in the line for the security check, and it was a huge long line, and they were patting people down and going through the bags. And I turned to Claire and I said, I can't enjoy this. And we just turned around and left. And I'm sure that that abusive search and security going on is going to discourage a lot of people from going to Disneyland. And if they start following this idea that men who think they're women can use the women's restroom, they're going to lose even more of their audience, more of their customers here. Now, interestingly enough, there was an article that came on out from Countercurrent News pointing out that the biggest threat of abuse in a restroom is not coming from transsexual people, but from GOP lawmakers. And they're going on down talking about how former U.S. Senator Larry Craig, Florida State Representative Bob Allen, Mississippi Congressman John Hinson, and people like that were arrested for sexual misconduct in a public bathroom. And it's a reminder that the curse of all political power is that it attracts the very sort of people who should not be allowed to have it. And the more attractive you make those positions of power, the more powerful they become, the more desperate people will be to get them. And you're going to wind up with a generation of politicians who will do anything to achieve elected office, like Hillary was trying to do. And then once they're in that office, they'll feel they can do anything they want with it. Again, going back to the abuse of the Clintons here. Now, apparently a Kentucky lawyer, Eric Cohn, who likes to call himself Mr. Social Security, has pled guilty to being part of a long-running fraud scheme against Social Security that racked up $550 million. $500 million, and he's looking at 12 years in prison. And the issue here is the more complicated you make the system, the more laws there are, the more you have areas in which these fraudsters can operate undetected for a long time. Of course, we have a problem in that all of our law enforcement agencies are keeping an eye on ordinary law-abiding citizens, and they're not really keeping watch on themselves. And again, a good example of that goes back to the Intelligence Committee's obsessing about Donald Trump and the Russians and ignoring the huge amount of factual evidence linking the Clintons to Russia. It is a dual standard system out there. Now, if you are going across the border of the United States of America, you are probably going to realize more and more your personal electronic devices are being searched by TSA. And because of this sudden surge, the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University has filed a Freedom of Information Act against the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, seeking statistical policy and assessment records regarding these searches. In other words, to put it simply, is there really a legitimate need, or is this just justifying the salary for whoever takes your electronic device and loots it for business secrets and naked pictures of your significant other? Of course, anybody these days who's doing a lot of traveling, you know you're not going to have anything on your cell phone anyway. Following TSA's dropping and ruining of a very expensive laptop up in Seattle, I have a little tiny netbook that I use when I travel. I don't use it any other time, and it's set up for mail and web browsing, and that's it. That's all that's on there. If they want to scan it, fine. Guess what? You're not going to find anything. It's a waste of everybody's time and money. So, now let's talk about the Apple iCloud hack, because a lot of people are getting very concerned. The deadline for Apple to pay the ransom, which actually isn't all that much, is April 7th. And a lot of people are sitting back and saying, well, I don't use the iCloud service. Here is the problem. Your iTunes account password is your iCloud password. And if these hackers have that, even if you're not using the iCloud, they can come on in, remotely change the password on your personal device, your iPad, your iPhone, so forth, loot it, shut it down, erase it. So basically between now and April 6th, change all your passwords on all your Apple devices. Do it now. I'll wait. Now, if these hackers carry out their threat, we're looking at millions, if not billions of dollars in damage to Americans' productivity, loss of their data. And by the way, if you're backing your devices up to the cloud, switch to internal storage. When you go into iTunes and it says back up the device, there's a little checkbox saying back up to the local computer. You should be using that anyway. Because if it's on the cloud, it's there for people to look at. Yes, it's encrypted with a U.S. government-approved encryption system, which means the government can read it. But if they carry out this threat, millions, if not billions of dollars in lost data, lost productivity, clearly this is a real present threat to the nation and its economy. So where is the National Security Agency in all this? Isn't it their job to protect the IT infrastructure? Wasn't that the excuse they used when they said, we're building all these data centers and we're spying on all of you, we've got to protect the IT infrastructure? Doesn't look like they're doing a very good job of it, does it? We're still getting email frauds, Viagra ads, malware pouring all over the system. If anything, it's gotten worse. There's an epidemic of browser hijackers out there. And if you are visiting my website and all of a sudden you're getting pop-over ads, especially for porn or gambling, those are not coming from my server, you've got a browser hijacker. I went ahead and I spent the money. I have a professional website scanning service that scans my website 3 times a day to identify malware that's on my server. And it's clean. So if you're getting abusive ads, if you're getting porn, gambling, whatever, you've got a browser hijacker. And nobody wants to do anything about it. And the problem with the browser hijackers is they're not just stealing ad revenues from the legitimate site because they're putting their ads over it. They're stealing our work, effectively. And they're stealing revenue from the legitimate advertising agencies that we have arrangements with. It is a crime by any definition of the word. Where's the NSA? Or is it the NSA? Remember, the Kaspersky Group identified a hacker collective, the Equation Group, as being NSA. Just like the CIA turned out to be the biggest drug smugglers in the entire country, the NSA may be the biggest cyber criminals in the country. It's wide open. Now, Microsoft is facing a class action lawsuit over the abusive, intrusive Windows 10 upgrade policy. And apparently this is coming out of Illinois, and they've turned it into a class action lawsuit, which means anybody who got burned by Microsoft's force upgrades can take part. And I'm going to sign on. Because remember, when Windows 10 first came out, I gave it an honest try. We took the laptop, which at that time was supporting Claire's Choir at the church, and we hit the button, OK the upgrade. And it came on up, and one of the first things it did, it insisted I use as my login credentials my Microsoft account information, which means hackers already have half of what they need to brute force their way into the machine. Then it literally erased all of the music data that had been on the machine under Windows 7. And I don't mean moved into the trash bin, I mean absolutely erased. Now, obviously, we had it backed up elsewhere. But, I mean, these are the kinds of problems we've had with Windows 10. And I do think it's time to start suing these companies and try and bring down this indemnification policy. Because back in the early days of computers, it did make sense to protect the fledgling computer industry against serious civil lawsuits. But computers are a mature industry, billions and billions of dollars every year. It's foolish to let them go on selling faulty product, faulty software, and protecting them from product liability. It's absolute foolishness, and it has got to come to an end. Product liability is what helps protect the consumer from sloppy, lazy, greedy manufacturers, whether it's computers, cars, vaccines, food, or whatever. It must be brought back. That'll help make America great again. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I'm going to share a little something positive from the world of computers. As I mentioned last week, I broke down and I bought one of these Raspberry Pi computer on a card. The specific one is the Raspberry Pi Zero, which literally the card itself is just $5, which is astounding. And the U.S. Post Office misdelivered it, but they apparently located where it went, and it was brought back to me, and I started playing with this thing. And I got to tell you, computers are fun again. I remember when computers were fun. The Apple II, the Commodore VIC, and they were simple, easy to understand, and you could do things with them. And these are so inexpensive that people are using them for all kinds of weird gadgets and art projects and everything. And, of course, the card by itself is not the computer. And if you go over to eBay, and he didn't pay for the advertisement, he doesn't even know I'm doing this, there's a seller, Berryku, spelled B-E-R-R-Y-K-U, and they sell Pi kits where you get a case for it, a power supply, and the adapters to allow you to plug in things like keyboards. This goes to HDMI video, so it's a 1920 by 1080 display. You have to supply a micro SD card for the system memory, and I sacrificed my porn collection to this endeavor, and it turned out to be really good. This thing is fun. This thing is cool. And what I'm going to do is I have this old digital controller that's left over from this project I worked on for an amusement park for Marvel Comics, where you would help the Hulk lift a car and then get your picture taken. And this just works off of USB, and so I'm going to put the two together and make a little controller for stepping motors, which I will either put on my Celestron telescope or a camera crane, although nobody does motion control photography anymore. But the first time I looked at this, and I said, yeah, this is something you can have fun with. Modern computers, they're almost more trouble than they're worth. This thing is Linux, so I've got this Linux. You could hide this in your wallet. I mean, that's amazing. And maybe the reason I'm jazzed is because I'm old enough to remember when computers filled entire rooms. I first learned programming using punched cards. That'll tell you how old I really am. And when I worked at a company called Robert Abel & Associates, they were one of the first companies to be doing computer animation for TV commercials and logos and so forth. And we used VAX 11720s, which were the size of a desk. This thing is more powerful, has more memory, more storage, and costs $5. And to me, that is just absolutely astounding. And again, much of this technology on this card was born in the fires of the Apollo program going to the moon, and that's why I think we need a new NASA focused on being a civilian technology incubator rather than trying to rubber stamp Al Gore and his human-caused global warming nonsense. Now, one place I don't think I would want to put this Raspberry Pi, story coming out of the Daily Mail, apparently there's a new company that has started up that has a computer-enabled device that women put inside their bodies to track their menstrual cycles. That, to me, is a little bit over the top. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go ahead and grab a couple of phone calls. Brendan in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I wanted to make a suggestion for the What Really Happened store.
Yes?
I hear the Maxine Water James Brown hairpiece is kind of hard to find. Maybe you can add that to your online store.
Well, I'll talk to Cafe Press about it, but we'll see. I'm actually looking for another provider because the T-shirts from Cafe Press don't last as long as I'd like them to, given how much they charge for them. But so if anybody has a suggestion for an alternative provider for T-shirts, I will definitely look at that.
Hey, real quick, thinking about Trump's security and this possible coup that's developing, I don't know if Trump's taking this threat seriously or not. I certainly am, and I know the country has proven they're willing to fight for Trump, and I thought he was willing to fight for us. I think it's time to start rounding up all these people that are calling for his overthrow, or at least call them to task. Michael Moore, Rosie O'Donnell, Elizabeth Warren, Maxine Waters. I mean, these people are literally calling for, the overthrow of a democratically elected president. As far as I know, that's against the law.
It is, but it's more than that. They're basically calling for the overthrow of our entire government so that they can make way for this liberal paradise on the path to the New World Order.
Right. Well, do you think Trump is taking this threat seriously?
I think he is, but unfortunately, Trump is wholly defensive right now. He's dealing with all of this pushback from Congress, and they're keeping him so busy and off balance with all of this Russia allegation stuff. I think too much of his authority has already been delegated to underlings who have their own agenda, especially when it comes to the war zones. I don't know how much of what we're seeing is really originating with Donald Trump as opposed to being created for him by his flappers, to go back to Jonathan Swift and Gulliver's Travels.
Right. Well, listen, these Trump supporters are out there in the streets trying to support him and taking a lot of physical and, even emotional blows. I just think we need to see something a little bit on our side. I'm still for locking Hillary Clinton up, or at least calling her in front of Congress to let's, air out some of her dirty laundry in a formal format and just go on offensive. The best defense is a good offense. If we're going to go down, if the Republic's going to fail, let's go down swinging. I'm tired of being on our heels, and I've done my due diligence. I'm trying to prepare and take care of my family and let my friends know what's going on. I'm taking this seriously, and I don't know if he quite gets what's at stake.
Well, I'm sure he's aware of what's at stake. Certainly, I would like to see a lot of these criminals behind bars, especially the Clintons. But what's going on here, as I've said many times before, there are two categories of secrets in politics. There are the little secrets that are the fodder for political campaigns and warring against each other, like Anthony Weiner and his problem with sexting underage girls. Then there are the great secrets that are so horrific that they would delegitimize and discredit the entire government as a whole and bring it crashing down. The truth behind the John F. Kennedy assassination, the truth behind 9/11, the fact that the Clintons and the CIA and the Bushes were running guns and drugs out of Arkansas, the fact that Hillary Clinton may have been selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests and using her charitable foundation to collect. If the whole mess came on out, the government would be over. And Donald Trump as president can be forgiven for thinking about wanting to keep the government going in some form, even as corrupt as it is, versus allowing it to collapse. But at this point, sooner or later, it's only a matter of time, we're going to have a Soviet Union-style collapse in this country, and we, the American people, have got to be prepared to stand up and decide for ourselves what the next government will be, and not let somebody come on in with a pre-made government and just sign your name on the dotted line, and we'll just restart the private central bank, and we'll restart the corporations, and everything will be hunky-dory. And we're gonna have to do that and create a new republic in this land based on the original constitutional principles. And we throw a few more things in there, like no more private central banks ever, 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 ever again.
Right. If you think about this governor, the governor, and even the mayor of Los Angeles, I mean, these subversive politicians, we're going to be having a bloody civil war in the streets just to kind of claw back what we had. I mean, they're flooding the country from left, right, and center. You know, pick your ethnic group, and you're going to sit here and say that we're going to have to reform a government. We're going to be sitting here fighting over food and water. I mean, I think this collapse is imminent, and yet no one's really talking about it to the degree in which we need to identify our enemies, all these you know, dude, this country's full of people that don't give a crap about this, the flag, the Constitution, and here we are trying to defend it. I mean, we got our hands full, and we got troops overseas that should be back here preparing for a civil insurrection. It's coming, and we're spread so far thin. How many wars do we have going right now? And we're ripe for invasion. I mean, it's not going to take a lot for someone to come in here and kick our butts.
Yeah,
with the enemy within.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, the federal government is so obsessed with turf wars and gotchas and the rest of it. They're not even functioning as a government any longer. Everything is being decided on the basis of, well, the Republicans are for it, therefore I'm against it. Right now, the Republicans could be standing up there urging for, you know, we finally have a real cure for cancer, and the Democrats would say, absolutely not, it's a threat to Obamacare, and if the Republicans are for it, I'm against it. And that kind of factionalism is a harbinger of a collapse about to come. And again, the parallels between what Washington, D.C. is doing right now and what Moscow was doing just months before the collapse of the former Soviet Union are very obvious. There are also strong parallels to the collapse of the Roman Empire. Way too much debt, usury out of control, insanity on the part of our rulers. In ancient Roman times, it was because of lead utensils and exposure to mercury. Today, it's prescription antidepressants. We've got all the signs of an empire on the verge of collapse. And I think probably the vast majority of the other countries on planet Earth would be very happy to see it happen.
Do we have a leg to stand on where we can say we are not going to pay for this nonsense anymore, and say it's taxation without representation, and put a case forward? I mean, Trump funding the Pentagon to me is ridiculous.
I agree.
And we're paying for this insanity. Can we just refuse to pay our taxes legally based on a corrupt government?
There is no legal way to refuse to pay taxes, because by default the government declares any refusal to pay tax illegal because they get to make up the rules. So it would just be like the colonials in America prior to 1776. You just think things through and you make your own choices what you're going to do. But again, my advice is to sit back, because the signs of self-destruction are all over Washington, D.C. and Wall Street. And I think the last thing, let me finish, the last thing that any of us want to do is to give the government an excuse to declare a national emergency because there's an insurrection, throw what's left of the Constitution into the shredder, and bring about this fascist dictatorship that obviously they are all lusting for. I think if we leave well enough alone, it's going to kill itself. It's in the process of doing that right now.
Well, to all my patriots out there, please prepare water, food, ammo.
Yes.
Don't sit back and wait. Get prepared. It's coming. I can see it. And, you know, God bless America, because we were the shining light. And I'm telling you, man, without America, the proper America, not this corrupt corporate garbage that's been going on for the last 50 years, I mean, the world is doomed, as far as I can tell from this point.
Because of globalism, an American crash is going to be a crash for everybody. And I talk about the fall of Rome. The fall of the American Empire could actually trigger almost a return to the Dark Ages. The only hope that we have is that the collapse of the American Empire will not collapse Russia and China with it, because they're already moving to isolate themselves from that. It'll certainly take down Europe. Without question, it will take down Europe. And that's a terrible thing to see. But again, it wasn't up to us. We had nothing to do with it. It's not like we're out here saying we want to bring it down. I'd be perfectly happy to go back to living in the Republic of the United States of America with the democratically elected leadership that's elected in honest and fair elections. I'd be perfectly happy. I'd be doing something else for a living now.
Listen, if Rosie O'Donnell and Michael Moore and Elizabeth Warren and Maxine James Brown Hairpiece Warren Waters can call for martial law, let's give them martial law under Trump, and let's crush these fools. I'm tired of this nonsense. He's got us, I said it before, he's got the truth on his side and he's got the patriots on his side. And these fools that are on the fence, they could easily be, if we brought these crimes to the light, they would easily say, okay, I get it now. I've been lied to.
Well,
let's take the fight to these fools.
Well, you know, the other thing, of course, everyone's talking about this massive illegal immigrants and refugees coming on in, and they're going to side with the liberal Democrats because the liberal Democrats are promising we'll take stuff away from the indigenous Americans, especially the Republicans, and we're going to give it to you. But anybody who thinks that these illegals and refugees are going to be an effective fighting force is dreaming. If civil war breaks out in this country, heaven forbid, these refugees and illegals will just turn around and go back to where they came from. The reason they're here in many cases is because they don't want to have to go through any kind of a war. Anyway, listen, Brandon, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to let
One last thing.
Real
I went
quick.
to a gun show in the Bay Area, and these guys were buying high-powered weapons with oodles of cash. So there's people prepared on the other side. Let you go. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, isn't it weird? Now the liberals are becoming preppers and buying up guns and all this stuff here. All right, we're going to go to Leland in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Gosh, my question now seems very small compared to that last phone call, but it's in regards to the Vincent Foster case.
Yes.
And back when it was all going on, I did lots of research on it because, you know, 2 and 2 was adding up to 5. So the information I have on one particular point was Vincent Foster was last seen in his office around 5:30 p.m. by an aide. His secretary had already left for the day. The aide stated that he did not seem upset or out of sorts, but normal.
Yes.
And then I just read the other article, but that could be in reference to the same time period, 5:30, on the article in your piece.
Well, there's, you know, the thing is that Vince Foster disappeared from inside the White House. There was no record by the Secret Service of him leaving the White House under his own power.
Right.
Personally, I think
no video evidence or anything.
Yeah, personally, I think after he was killed, that he was rolled up in an old carpet and just carried out through like the tunnel through the Treasury building. And the reason I think that is because the soil underneath Washington, D.C. is very micaceous, a lot of mica in there, and it was even in the report, the forensics report, that his clothing was covered with mica, which they tried to claim he'd gotten by brushing through the foliage in Fort Marcy Park, but there really wasn't enough there for that. But right. I think that's what happened. I think in the White House his neck was broken. Right. They took him to Fort Marcy Park and dumped him there, tried to fake a gunshot wound into his mouth, which resulted in a second wound on his neck, and it just sort of went downhill from there.
Right. And another most interesting fact, at least from what I took down, was that his office was completely redecorated the very next day. Drapes, carpets, desk, everything, the very next day.
That I had not heard. That I had not heard. I know that the office was looted and plundered by Hillary's chief of staff before the park police were allowed in there, and that's definitely a violation of legal procedures. And Vince Foster's White House safe was opened by a special technical team, and its contents were taken as well. And that may have been Vince Foster's big mistake, because people in those kind of positions where you know the people that you're working for are dangerous, you have what are called dead man switches, and Foster's mistake was leaving his dead man switch in his White House office safe. And that was that made it vulnerable. And if they can negate your dead man switch, then you are a dead man.
Right. I felt so sorry for that security officer in the congressional hearing, because it was obvious he was telling the truth, because he was literally shaking. And he stated that Hillary and Foster's secretary did, in fact, remove boxes to Mr. Clinton, to the president's closet. And then she got up there and denied it. And then, of course, after the lunch break, her legal team came back and advised her, and she recanted her testimony and said, well, yeah, I guess we did.
Yeah, it's a mess. Anyway, listen, Foster's a long time ago. It goes back to the beginning of my career, the end of my career in Hollywood and the beginning of my career as a truth activist, and that's 23 years now. Wow, how time flies when you're
I know, that's too far
having death threats.
Okay, thanks. It's been good talking to you.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to take 2 more phone calls, and then we're going to close the lines until I can get the rest of this news out of here. Bruce in Texas, what's on your mind?
Hello, Michael.
Hello, Bruce.
Hey, well, if that was too long ago, maybe what I'm bringing up is way too long ago.
Well, it depends. Tell me what you want.
All righty. Have you ever considered what could have happened if the Germans would have defeated the Soviets back in Stalingrad, and what the world would have looked like?
Well, yeah, if the Nazis had succeeded in taking Moscow, all of the resources that were on that Eastern Front would have been moved to the Western Front, and Germany may not have conquered the entire world, but they would still be in possession of a large part of Europe.
Yeah. There would still be an Israel, though, wouldn't there, due to the transfer agreement? Wasn't that happening before the outbreak of World War II?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the Zionists and the Nazi government were working on a scheme to make Madagascar the independent nation for the Jews, but the hardcore Zionists said, no, it's got to be Palestine or nothing.
Yeah, so they were actually moving to Palestine at the outbreak. It's just something, Europe would have been whole. It would have been under a different flag. It would have been split like it was after World War II. It wouldn't have been demolished either. It's just something I consider, and I don't think the subject that he touched on, maybe because it's kind of ludicrous or, what if. It doesn't have anything to do with today, but
okay.
It's just, all righty.
All right, well, Bruce, we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who rejoined our network actually a long time ago, and I didn't get to the acknowledgement here. And we're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the lines for a little while because I got some news to get out there. Errol in the Netherlands, you're back to talk about vaccines again, I guess.
No, I changed my subject.
Ah, good for you.
Yeah, and also good for you. I worked for Swift.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I was in the facility. I got all the clearance and everything. And I want to say one thing to you that's very interesting. I also find it funny because we had then, that time after 9/11, we had those CDs, the compact discs.
Yes.
There were robots, like compact discs. We had, first we had cassettes, that were always registering who made what deal or whatever, And there are only 3. There's one in Brussels, there's one in I think New York, and the other one, yes, there are only 3. So that's very interesting. I worked there. high clearance, and also very many programmers. So I want to just to say that to you.
Okay.
Because,
well, we're going to have to let you go.
interesting.
We're going to have to let you go because we got to take a break for commercials. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to close the lines for a little while. We may reopen them before the end of the show, but I got some news I need to get to. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the corporate media is, for the most part, obsessing over the sanctuary city question. Pay no attention to these wars over there. Pay no attention to the U.S. bombing all these civilians in Iraq and Syria. We need to talk about the illegal immigrants and their inherent right to be here. And they're basically on the attack against Donald Trump and the threat to pull federal funding from these cities that are refusing to allow the enforcement of federal immigration laws. And it's just out of control. Apparently there's been another ugly incident in London, down in the Tube, where a woman was just pushed in front of an oncoming train by one of these refugees, just for the heck of it. There's a problem. Now, common sense says every nation, every group of people have a right to secure their borders. Whether it's the wall around the fort, the wall around the town, the wall around the nation. To choose who does and does not come in to their country. That's just common sense. This idea that the world should be free of borders, that's a new construct from the globalists. It's imaginary, a world where there are no borders. There's always going to be borders. Look at the walls going up around the wealthy people. Gated communities, security. They believe in walls there. Everybody's criticizing Donald Trump's wall with Mexico. Not a word about Israel's wall with Palestine. Apparently some walls are okay and others are not. Funny little story here. Apparently last Sunday at midnight, a bunch of witches, Satanists, and occultists had a mass ritual in front of Trump Tower to cast a binding spell on President Donald Trump. I think they've been watching too many episodes of Sleepy Hollow. The short version, they got rained out. Storm came on over, rain came pouring down, end of the witches' coven. Of course, if they were sky-clad, then at least they don't have to worry about drying out their clothing. Getting on into the climate, Trump has now signed an executive order. It's called the Energy Independence Order that basically kills Obama's climate change initiatives to stop human-caused global warming, which was a joke to begin with. And they're talking about pulling off these limits on the use of coal. They want to go back to focusing on low-sulfur clean coal. But the ban on all coal is now basically rescinded, much to the delight of those portions of the United States that are living on the basis of a coal economy. Now, one of the areas that we need to remember, liberals like to dream of an ideal world and pass a bunch of laws to try and ban anything else that doesn't fit that idea. The part the liberals are missing and don't pay attention to is how to get from the real world as it is today to their ideal world step by step by step so that it will work and you're not ruining people's lives and industries in the process. Sometimes they'll come up with these harebrained schemes and they'll say, oh, we want ethanol-based fuel, it'll be great, and it turned out to be a disaster. Oh, we're going to have wind farms. They turned out to be a disaster. We're going to have solar. Look at how that worked out. They don't think these things through. They get an idea in their head, and they say, we will force laws mandating people to do this. And they do it before the technology is established and robust, and they keep failing. And then they come on back and scream, it's all you conservatives' fault that we couldn't make it work. The road to the dark regions is paved with good intentions and littered with sloppy analysis. Please keep that in mind. And maybe it's an artifact of our system of government where everybody's only in power for 2, 4, 6, maybe 8 years. except for those old guard protected by election fraud fossils like McCain. Maybe if people had a political system that worked over the long term instead of what looks good for the next election, we might avoid some of these mistakes. Going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Sorry, a little late on the pot there. I was responding to somebody. I'm getting a lot of emails from people about the Raspberry Pi and how much fun they're having with it. Somebody wrote in and said they haven't had as much fun since the days of the Commodore 64. And that's what I was telling the guy I got this from on eBay. I said, oh, this is a computer that's fun again, that reminds us of what computers felt like when they first came along, because it's just all there, and there's pins. You can modify the board. You can put on all kinds of things and just make it do fun, cool things. I did a web search for cool things to do with the Raspberry Pi, and you'd be amazed some of the things people are doing. There was one guy who literally turned it into an FM radio transmitter by simply coding some tight loops in there and attaching an aerial to one of the lines out there, and was actually able to broadcast. I mean, it is an amazing little device, and I'm so impressed. And again, that's because I'm an old guy, and I remember when computers were big, huge things. I remember when I was working at the Table Mountain Observatory, and they had a computer for the radio telescope that was built with discrete components, actually predated integrated circuits, and just filled with all these racks and racks of cards with all these transistors, very tightly packed. And I didn't get to use it because it got hit by lightning. And that was an interesting summer. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Now, getting on back to the environment. Dylan Pohl is out there on Breitbart basically saying that Scott Pruitt is failing to drain the swamp at the Environmental Protection Agency, and saying that Trump's attempts to drain the swamp are being undermined by one of his key administrators, and that is a major problem. And as I've said before, Donald Trump has unfortunately come into the White House as dangerously naive about the reality of D.C. politics as Jimmy Carter was. Trump has spent his entire life in business. That's how he thinks. That's how the people he's used to dealing with think. And he's coming in there with a mindset about, I'm going to hire people with good qualifications and they will do what I tell them to do, and that is not what is happening. He's having these old guard holdovers recommended to him, and not realizing that even though Donald Trump is, for all intents and purposes, signing their paychecks, their loyalties are not with Donald Trump. They're with the establishment, the status quo, the bureaucracy. And at some point, Trump, if he's going to be an effective president, he's got to clean house. He's got to get rid of the holdovers. He should have built his entire administration out of people from outside the political sphere. Bring in scientists, engineers, educators. There's lots of qualified people all over the country who've just never felt like they wanted to be in politics. Bring them in and let them run things. Trump's mistake was going into the political swamp and expecting some of those politicians to help him drain it. It was never going to happen. It was never, ever going to happen. By the way, as a footnote to all this screaming about 2016 was the hottest year on record, which we're getting shouted at us from all of the corporate media, without any support for it whatsoever, other than the word of Noah that has been caught rigging the data time and time and time again. They've cooked the books so much there's only a little tiny pile of ash left. Over in Japan, they had an avalanche at a ski resort, 8 killed. Horrible tragedy, but yes, there's still snow out there. It's snowing in Utah and Colorado right now. And still they're pushing human-caused global warming. They want that carbon tax. They want your money. They want your obedience. And they will do and say anything to get it, because that's how they think. You only exist to make them rich. You only exist to do what they tell you to do. And if you don't make them rich and do what they tell you to do, then what use are you? Why should we even let you go on living? We've been talking about nuclear disasters. We were talking yesterday about this absolutely horrific use of depleted uranium in all of these war zones. Now, I got some emails from people saying, well, depleted uranium kind of sounds like it's not that big a deal. Actually, it is. When you take raw uranium from the ground and you want to turn it into either reactor fuel or nuclear bomb stuff, it has to go through a process called enrichment. And the enrichment basically involves separating the isotopes of uranium. There's a tiny fraction of natural uranium which will support fission. And this is what is needed for reactor fuel and for bombs. And they'll separate that out, and what's left over is called the depleted uranium because it's depleted of the fissionable isotope. But it's still uranium, and it is still radioactive. And it has a half-life of 4.5 billion years, with a B. And Claire is just seriously upset about all this. We're going to be putting a lot of attention on this. We're going to need the help of the Rivero's Rangers to take these photos of these babies, newborn babies, being deformed by the use of these weapons, and get them out into the public eye. Where are the right-to-life people? They're always screaming about, oh, abortion is wrong, abortion is wrong. Let's get them screaming about it's wrong to deform a baby in the womb with the use of these depleted uranium munitions. And it's not just the enemy. This has hit our returning veterans' families as well. So we're going to be making a big, big stink about that. Claire's already got a new piece of music. We're going to do a video on that. And that's the military use of this radioactive waste. And there's a lot of it built up. They don't know what to do with it. Well, we'll make it into bombs and bullets, and we'll make our radioactive waste problem their radioactive waste problem. So we've had 3 Mile Island's accident. We've had Chernobyl's accident. We have the Hanford nuclear site, highly contaminated. We've had Fukushima, and it looks like we may be on the verge of another one because apparently fire has shut down 3 coolant systems at Turkey Point nuclear plant. And Turkey Point is one of these nuclear facilities that has already gone past the end of its design lifespan. But they were granted a permit to continue. Because they're making money. Why should we shut them down when they're making money? Just because the reactor's, starting to fall apart. See, here's the problem with the nuclear reactor. It's the neutron flux. And it will degrade and weaken the metal in the containment vessel, which is the big boiler where the fissioning fuel rods will boil the primary coolant or heat the primary coolant. It then goes to a secondary heat exchanger, and there it heats fresh, non-radioactive water, which goes to drive the turbines for the power plant. But the neutron flux weakens the metal over time. And that's why all nuclear power plants have a finite life span. They're designed and built to last all of this corrosive radioactive environment for so many years, and after that they're supposed to be decommissioned and shut down, although nobody has figured out what to do with the remains of these nuclear stations. And we have a problem in the United States where a large number of nuclear power stations are being allowed to operate past the end of their original design lifespan. And that is just plain dangerous. They're risking more Fukushimas just to improve the profit margin. And that is very dangerous. Now, let's talk about vaccines here. And this is where Errol wanted to talk about when he called in hour number 1 here. Very revealing story coming out of wearechange.org. There was a recent Freedom of Information Act filed in Great Britain by a doctor to get all the documents about vaccines, what was known about them, not known about them, and what it reveals is stunning. For 30 years, government experts in Great Britain have known that vaccines don't work. They have known that vaccines will often cause the diseases they are supposed to prevent. We've been seeing that here in the United States, where there'll be headline news about a mumps outbreak, get your vaccination, or measles outbreak, get your vaccination. Then we find out the people who've come down with measles and mumps had the vaccines. Government experts in Great Britain have known for 30 years vaccines are a hazard to children. Government experts in Great Britain colluded to lie to the public and worked to prevent safety studies. It's a policy of profit over people, and it's not just happening here in the United States, it's happening in Great Britain and all over the world. We were reporting yesterday, Sweden is coming up on a vote, a referendum that will mandate massive vaccinations for everybody in Sweden. And if they make you sick, well, we've got more medications to treat the symptoms. Money, 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 money. Story out of greenmedinfo.com, and they're talking about research coming out from top doctors, acknowledged experts in the field, saying that one of the big problems with vaccines is not only do they weaken your natural immune system, making you more vulnerable to illness or more dependent on these vaccines, they can actually turn the immune system against you. And they're starting to realize that this sudden surge in autoimmune disorders in the population is linked to the escalating numbers of vaccines we're all being told we have to have. There are known harmful materials, toxic metals like mercury in the vaccine ingredients. The epidemic of peanut anaphylaxia coincides with the use of peanut oil as a vaccine adjuvant. And this is not a modern problem. The CDC has been forced to admit that between 1955 and 1963, over 98 million Americans received a dose of a polio shot that was contaminated with a cancer-causing virus, simian virus 40. And what they're discovering now, all these years later, is if you have been infected with this simian virus 40, you can pass it on to your children. It goes down generation to generation. Gee, look at the skyrocketing cancer rates. I wonder what happened there. Well, skyrocketing cancer rates, that's a good thing. It's good for the medical industrial complex. Look at all these people having to give their money to the oncologists and everything. It's a very dark world that we live in, where the government, the bankers, the medical industrial complex, the military industrial complex really see the ordinary population as just another resource. They don't respect us as human beings. They wouldn't lie to us the way they do if they had any respect for us as human beings. Yesterday we were talking about they're revising the law regarding informed consent for medical testing. It used to be that if a pharmaceutical corporation and a doctor wanted you to participate in the test of a new drug or procedure, they would have to give you full information about it. This is what it hopes to do, this is what it could do, this is how it might harm you, and then they would get your permission. Now they've changed the law. Informed consent is no longer required if the possible risk is minimal, and minimal is up to the practitioner or the pharmaceutical industry. Well, yes, your nose fell off. That was a minimal risk. That's why we didn't tell you. Now, apparently over at EchoWatch, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and I'm glad we're starting to hear from him again because he's supposed to be in charge of this Vaccine Safety Commission for the Trump administration, is basically saying that ever since vaccines were protected from civil litigation under the Homeland Security Act, quality control has obviously been abandoned, and they're starting to find things in vaccines which even the pharmaceutical companies acknowledge shouldn't be there. Metal debris, biological contamination, actual physical particles of toxic materials. Vaccines have literally become vials filled with whatever was left over in the White House, in the warehouse, and they're going to stick it into your arm because it makes money. And in the United States of fascist America, things that make money are good, and things that don't make money are bad. How dare you criticize anything that makes money? That's un-American. People have decided they don't want to be exposed to these dangers. What do? Pass a law. It's now mandatory. We don't care if these vaccines are killing children. Your children will have them. Now they're talking about mandatory vaccines for adults. I don't need a measles vaccine. I had measles when I was a kid. I'm immune. I had mumps when I was a kid. I'm immune to that. I don't need a vaccine. You will take your vaccine und you will like it, you Schwein. Give us your money. Now then, statins. Originally hailed by the corporate media and the medical industrial complex as the wonder drug, cholesterol lowering, we're going to stop all this heart disease. And they found out since then statins actually present a danger, because the cholesterol does not slowly fade away from the arterial walls. It falls off in large clumps that can get lodged in very inconvenient places in the heart. I suspect that's what happened to my youngest brother, because he was on statins. He'd lost a lot of weight. The doctors put him on statins. 2 months later, stroke. 6 months after that, died. Now they're finding out that statins raise the risk of diabetes by 50% in older women. They're not being careful with any of this. They'll put something together, they'll collude with the FDA to say, yes, it's safe and effective. They'll put it on the market, sell it to you. And this is why we live in a society where you'll watch TV and you'll see these very glitzy commercials for the latest prescription medication, immediately followed by the commercial from the ambulance-chasing lawyer saying, if you've been hurt by that same medication, we will sue on your behalf. It's just a giant mill to churn people into money. Healthy people go in the front, money comes out the back for the doctors and for the lawyers. Hippocrates is spinning in his grave, wherever that may be. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. Yesterday, we were talking about the saturation in our society of prescription psychiatric medication and how we could very literally be drugging our entire population into aberrant behavior. Suicide, mass shootings, domestic violence, bar fights, road rage, pedophilia, who knows what's possible out there. And it turns out there's another area in which Americans are being drugged into torpor, maybe. Now, we all know there's an opium problem all over the world here, but it may surprise you to find out that approximately 80% of the global opium supply is consumed here in the United States of America, both with the illegal heroin trade and the overuse of prescription opiates. That's been in the news a lot about how pharmaceutical corporations are literally encouraging practitioners to prescribe opiate medications to get patients hooked and make more money off of them. If you include Canada and Western Europe, which have their own medical industrial complexes, that accounts for 95% of the world's opium supply. So when you talk about a nation that is succumbing to opium, it isn't China, it isn't Africa, it isn't Japan, it isn't Australia, it's right here in the United States. Do you remember what happened to China when Britain won their war over Britain's right to sell opium to the Chinese people, and they had the opium dens, and it ultimately helped bring down the imperial government and pave the way for communism? Are they doing that here as well? We know the CIA has been trafficking in heroin at least as far back as the war in Vietnam. The biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. All right, we're going to try and squeeze one more phone call in here. Boyce in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yep. Hi, Mike. Right on board with that. Hey, listen, I'll tell you right now, amazingly, you're saying all this. I grew up in a city in the Detroit area, in the suburb area. We had like one pharmacy when I was growing up. And there's probably about 25,000, 30,000 people here now. But guess what? There's 35 pharmacies in my local area here in probably a 5-mile range. We are like inundated with this drug problem here. People, I go into people's houses, I'm a contractor, and they'll have 30, 40 drugs on their table. I say, man, Mrs. Jones, what's going on? Why do you have all these drugs? She goes, well, this one takes care of this one. This one handles this one.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you. This is absolutely incredible what's going on here. I just heard in Warren, Michigan, they're already up to 173 deaths from opioids and also drugs that have, you said it earlier, I'm sorry, but from heroin-related drugs.
Yeah, there was one. I have to cut you off. We're at the end of the show here, but there was one story on the front of what really happened about a kid who had to call 911 because his babysitter overdosed on prescription opiates. Anyway, we got to get on out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Share what you know with everybody that you know. Go gentle. You're dealing with people who are trapped and enslaved by their belief system. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.